excited to share a little bit about my personal journey around my winning formula for telling a financial story. So first, I'd like to begin with why presentation, or why the financial storytelling is so important, and why it's such a critical skill set for FP&A professionals to learn. So as many of you know, when you're in FP&A, a key component of our roles is to drive the right insights and the right analytics to drive the business forward. Now, in today's world, we've got access to a tremendous amount of data, right? Both internal and external data. And this is why storytelling is so critical, because it allows us to take all that data, focus on the key insights, translate that into a cohesive story, and ultimately gain that cross-functional alignment, better decision-making, and drive action within the organization. Now, I can recall, early in my career when I learned this very valuable lesson around storytelling. And it was a time early in my career where I was presenting month-end results, and I jumped right into the details of the numbers, no real context, no real story, and certainly didn't focus on any key insights. And at the end of the day, didn't drive any decisions, and certainly didn't drive action within the organization. And so for me, that's why financial storytelling is so critical for FP&A professionals to learn, because it allows us to enable that decision-making process and ultimately drive collaboration and the business forward. So with that, I just like to then introduce, I guess, my winning formula for telling a financial story. So it's a very simple framework that basically takes all of that data and synthesizes it into the what, the so what, and the now what. Basically, what's the issue, what does it mean to the business, and what are we going to do about it? Now, underpinning this framework are two critical enablers for success. Number one, you got to know your details, right? It's very hard to tell a financial story if you don't understand the details that underpin it. And number two, you need to translate the numbers into a business action or an event. It's really important to remember that at the end of the day, the numbers are simply an output of a business action or an event. So your ability to talk in terms of a business action or a business event and communicate that to your audience will greatly improve your storytelling and allow for that cross-functional collaboration and that business action that you want to drive. So with that, I'd just like to spend a few minutes going through each element of the framework. So the what. The what is all about setting the appropriate context or background to your storytelling. It really helps drive the objective and the theme of the story that you want to tell. This is where understanding the details is so important, because it allows you to synthesize all those details into clear and concise facts that will support the story you want to tell. So if we use this as in an example, and I chose inflation as an example because I'm sure many of you on the call today have all experienced inflationary pressures within your respective businesses. Now, one way to tell that story is to simply jump into the numbers and talk about the cost increases that are impacting your businesses. The other way is to really talk about the what, or the background as to why costs are rising. So talk a bit about in terms of the market factors. That could look something like this. There are geopolitical factors or tensions that are driving the cost of grain and the fuel up. There are supply-demand imbalances caused by COVID that could be causing ocean freight costs to rise. There are labor shortages in certain markets that are causing wage rates to rise. All of these, as you can see, are critical factors and important background that helps your audience understand the magnitude of the problem and the factors or the why behind the numbers that are increasing. And once your audience understands that important background, you can now lead them into, well, what does that mean to their businesses? And that takes me to the next element of the framework, which is the so what. The so what is all about translating that background or context, i.e. the what, in terms of what does it mean to the business. This is where you focus on insights that really make it real for your business partners, right? Because once the business partners understand the impact to their respective areas, you can then lead them down the path of action to address it. So again, leveraging that inflation example that we talked about, the what talked about the market forces that were driving costs to increase. The so what would translate that market forces into the impact on your business. What's the cost increases on certain products and by how much? What's the cost impact on customers and how much? What's the cost impact on countries and how much? The point is you're now making that data real to the audience that you want to communicate to. And when you supplement that with the background as to why it happened, you can now lead them to what are we going to do about it, which brings me to the last element of the framework, or the now what. And the now what is where it all comes together, right? As the quote says, action is the foundational key to all success. This is where FP&A has the opportunity to provide their recommendations and their input in terms of influencing the business to drive action, right? So if done correctly, we would have told the story with the what, the what being the market factors that are impacting costs, the so what, how does that cost translate into your business, and the now what is what would we recommend doing to solution it. In the case of inflation, it could be, are we going to recommend pricing? Are we going to recommend promotional changes, spend changes? Are we going to recommend working with our supply chain partners to try to mitigate the cost of inflation? Or all of the above, depending on your unique situation. I think the key at the end of the day, as you're going through this framework, is you want to set the appropriate context, provide the impact to the business, and provide the recommendations in such a way that you drive that cross-functional collaboration, enable better business decisions, and ultimately drive action within your organization. Now, that kind of concludes the basis of the framework. I'd like to just end my presentation with a few tips that I use in terms of putting a presentation together. And so there's several tips that I'll just quickly walk the folks through. So number one, take the time to understand the story you want to convey, okay? This is after you've done your detailed analysis. It's very helpful to take a step back, kind of look at the forest from the trees, and really try to think through the messaging that you want to give to your audience. Two, tailor your story to your audience, right? Different audiences require different levels of detail. And so it's so important to keep that in the back of your mind. Number three, each slide should have an insight that supports the story. All too often I see finance presentations with a bunch of numbers on the presentation slides, but there's no real insight there that's called out. The insight exists, but it's left up to the audience to figure it out. So I think it's super important to make sure that you call out the insight on each slide that helps support the story you want to tell. Number four, use data visualization. Ron mentioned that earlier in his presentation, and there's great tools out there like ThinkCell that help enable data visualization in a very clean, simple way. And 5, 6, and 7 is leveraging the framework we just discussed. So always provide that appropriate background and context, which is the what, synthesize the message into a clear and concise points, articulating the impact of the business, which is the so what, and ultimately provide your recommendations that gain that cross-functional alignment and drive the business forward, which is the now what.